Black Oni.
What's up, tubes? This is Will Wiggins, aka JBlaze06 here, CEO and founder of Black Oni. Want to welcome everyone to the channel, both new and old. Thank you for tuning in to this tutorial. This is a Miss Marvel time-lapse tutorial. What you're seeing in front of you now is the initial sketch that I did while I was at Hartford Comic Con. Actually, I believe I was at New York Comic Con for this one. I was at the special edition. My apologies. This is the special edition New York. And I want to basically have this tutorial available for you guys to know what my process is like. And hopefully this will provide some type of information that's useful to you guys so that you can further improve your own skills. So I'm going to speed this process up so you guys can get a good look quickly and easily of what I'm doing here. And you'll see that I'm adjusting everything, going in and really altering all of that. And now I'm going over this entire thing with another layer. And so you're going to see the layers accumulate. And I'm adding this extra layer. I'm making the layer below that blue so that it's easier to kind of go over those new lines with a more refined version. I'm using a pencil tool. And I'm just going through making sure that all of my proportions are where they need to be. And you'll see even further on that I start changing things a little bit depending on where things are placed. And of course, the pencil is only able to do so much on a small paper. So there are a lot of details that I will be filling in as I'm going along with this initial pencil sketch after that first rough sketch I did on paper. This is all digital, of course. You can see I'm even selecting things and shifting things around, and it's really important to do that. Use that move tool, use that select tool to really shift things and move things around so that you have a better control and better sense of what you want things to be. And experiment with that kind of stuff because it's really important to see what possibilities there are. And you'll even see here I'm still changing things around the eyes, trying to get them just right. And going through with the hair, I'm still figuring out, as you can see, I'm going outside of those lines, figuring out ways I can make the hair as dynamic as possible. For one of the things I really wanted to emphasize in this piece was to have the hair be as flowy and as energetic as possible. And you'll see it with the sash as well. The sash will change a lot from what you're seeing here. And here I'm going through, making sure all the curves are just right. I don't like having too many straight lines in my designs and in my artwork. I like to have, every seemingly line should have at least some type of curve to it. It adds a little bit of dynamic to your piece, and you'll find that actually, even if there are things that look like they're completely straight, unless it's a straight edge or a straight object that isn't in a particular perspective, you'll want to add some type of curve to it to help create some sense of dynamic energy and flow to it. And so, here, one of the hardest things I feel about creating art, working with these characters is getting that hair just right. And so what you're seeing here is me working on the Cintiq with the camera right behind. And the thing about this camera that I'm using is that it's only able to record 15 minutes at a time before its sensor needs to cool down. And mine did actually overheat quite a bit while I was doing this. So you'll see it kind of cut up in a lot of variety of different places. And some parts are cut out because sometimes the camera would cut out without me realizing that it cut out. So, and what you're seeing me using here is a pencil brush that I downloaded from an online user. I don't remember what the website is. I will try to credit him in the description down below of this video. But he made some really interesting brushes. I really like them. They feel very true to life and true to nature. He made some ink brushes. He also made the pencil brush. It has a texture to it and also has a default setting to keep the pressure sensitivity settings a specific way. And even in this part of the process, after I've gone through that initial sketch and put it into blue, you'll see that this sketch is also still changing things. The more that drawing is very similar to sculpting in a lot of ways. You have to keep building and building on foundations that you've laid down, and that's why it's so important to make sure that you have solid armatures and solid stick figures. And this sketch started off as a stick figure. It started off as a stick figure that I went through and refined into creative forms from there, and now I'm bringing it into Photoshop and creating even further forms from there. So, I tell people all the time that it's really important to make sure that you're starting off with those armatures, those stick figures, to really lay a foundation of placement and where you want things to be and how you want the overall feel of the piece to look, and then you can build on that as you continue going on. And so you'll see here, even though this angle isn't really the greatest for kind of showing what I'm doing exactly, I'm still changing the hair. I'm still trying to get the hair just right, trying to get the curls and the flowiness to make sense in terms of where she's moving, where she is on the page, and I it's drawing the hair is tricky, but coloring it as well is really tricky because you really want to, especially for what I was trying to do here. I was really trying to invoke that sense of energy and power. I want her to feel powerful. I want her to feel elegant, but I also want it to be beautiful. And then here I am, still adjusting some of these lines, and these aren't even the final lines. These are pre-final lines. So this is basically the roughest version of the piece that I will have before I start the final line work. And you'll see that process starting now. I've lightened that previous layer. I made that layer probably about like 30 or 40% opacity and used the hue and saturation to make it blue. And I clicked colorize so that it would be blue, so that it's easier to go through here and just jump right in and actually start inking it. So this inking process takes a little while because you really want to make sure that your lines are as precise as possible. And you don't want to do it to the point where you're zooming in all the way to the entire image and you can see every pixel by pixel. That's not really that useful because no one, unless the image is going to be blown up to the size of like each pixel will be the size of each person, you're not going to be that close to the piece, especially if it's going to be printed on like 11 by 17 poster. You're never going to see each individual pixel. It would be absurd to expect that of yourself. And this again, this part of the process is necessary because you really want to have a lot of flexibility with the piece after you've adjusted it. And so again, one of the beautiful things about working in digital is that after you've already started doing something, you can always move something, and you have a lot of flexibility. And that's kind of the beauty and beast of working in digital, is that you have this great ability. The undo button, for example, is a great ability, but it also limits your brain into kind of going with a direction and sticking to it. You have so many options and so many possibilities for what you can do that it sometimes becomes overwhelming to realize that you have so many options at your disposal that you don't always know what's the best for you. Whereas in traditional art, sometimes the best for you is what you're capable of doing at that particular point with those materials. That would be the limit of what you were able to, do, and that in itself is a very beautiful thing. And I'm switching over to going directly onto screen so that you guys can have a better view of what I'm doing here. You can even see I'm continuing to change the piece. The blue underneath is signifying where those lines originally were, and I'm changing all that around. And you'll see with even this sash that the sash is going to be completely different by the time it gets to the end of this. But, well, not completely different, but you'll see actually right here that I switched the sash position around to kind of better mimic the flow of her hair, as well as kind of going with the movement a little bit more consistently. Before, it looked really cool because of the balancing of the shapes, going up and down, but this makes more sense in terms of the context of where she's positioned, how she's, jutting forward. The other sash position didn't really make too much sense. Another grand tip for you guys, pro tip, is to use a rotation tool to your advantage. Sometimes getting the curve just right with your hand is a little bit difficult unless you're working at a particular angle. So this angle here is really useful. The ability to change the angle here is really useful in terms of like really feeling comfortable and in the zone with what you're working on. And you usually don't want to have too many things that will knock you out of this zone. You never want the technology to be a barrier. And to be honest, the technology did become a barrier to me while I was working on this because I need to take my computer to the doctors. There's something wrong with it. It needs to, I think the graphics card is starting to fail a little bit, so I'm going to need to get that fixed. And so here I have the line work almost done completely. I still have to do a few things, but you'll see me doing something different than I actually usually do. In this one, I create another layer below, of course, the line layer to signify where the shading is going to go and what's going to happen with that. And what you're seeing here again is a little bit more of that the fact that I had turned things off for a little while because the graphics card was kind of chugging along. It might have even been just a video card. It was having a lot of issues handling recording and rendering this at the same time. But I'm going through. I changed the color of the shading, and that halftone that you see in the background was actually done in Illustrator. And maybe I'll have a tutorial specific to doing the halftone effect. But I find that the halftone effect can be really interesting. And here is a little bit of Illustrator action. So I use Photoshop and Illustrator quite a bit. At work, I use Illustrator more than Photoshop. But in terms of like my digital art that I do at home or for clients, in terms of digital paintings and stuff like that, it's pretty much almost all Photoshop, unless I'm doing something that's either very needs to be pinpoint accurate for line work or doing stuff that's really involving with text. So you'll see here that I'm altering all these vectors and shapes with the text, using just very basic tools: the pen tool, the move tool, the direct select tool. I use the gradient, and for the Mr. Marvel to get all that gradient all on one thing, I just went in and made the shape. I expanded the shape and made it a compound path. That way, it would be recognized as one object, just being separated as opposed to separate objects. And you'll see in the background is the American flag. And I actually did that American flag in Illustrator and then brought it into Photoshop. And again, this is another one of those things where I really wish I could have showed you that part of the process. But I used the warp tool to warp the shape and the contours of the American flag. I applied a texture, and then you'll see later on that I'll continue working on that, and not just not just going to leave it as apply color and apply a texture and that's it. Like, you actually have to go in and adjust the shading based off of the contours of those shapes. So what you're seeing here is me filling in the flats, just going in and making sure that all of my colors are where they need to be. Another interesting technique that I used for doing these flats was I did a silhouette of the entire image with the line work included. And I put that silhouette below the line art, all the way at the bottom, and on a separate layer, of course. And I used the clipping mask function to keep all the lines in outside, not going outside of those lines. So I found this technique to actually be really helpful and really interesting because I was able to very quickly go in and just alter a lot of those certain aspects. And then you'll actually see later on, after I've done a lot of the filling in of each of those, like that technique I was showing you, for example, won't really help you with doing these parts that are inside of the lines, but those parts that are outside of the lines are going to, you're not going to have to worry about that. So each of these aspects are all on different layers. So the eyes, the mouth, the skin, the hair, the mask, the lightning bolt, the leather, those are all on different layers. And so what you're seeing right now is me making sure those layers are all separated and all kind of individually on their own, so that they don't occupy any other spaces. And again, that shading, that I can't even use words now, that layer that I had for the initial shading and figuring out where the lighting source was and where the shadows were going, that's actually multiplied over on top of the standard stuff that I did. So already, in a very simple and easy way, if you want to do very simple shading, that's one of the best ways to do it. The multiply pretty much automatically multiplies whatever color onto that surface or onto that layer, and you'll get the colors that you really want to work from. So one of the things that you can do is either overlay or multiply. I think I use multiply in this situation. And you can duplicate that layer just by leaving your finger on, if you're using a Mac, Alt Option, and then moving that layer up. And then once you move that layer up, it actually adds even more to that. So if you wanted to be a little darker, you could do that. And again, this is just a very quick overview style tutorial. It's not a super in-depth of every aspect of what I did here. That would take way too long to explain all that. But this is a tutorial that's designed for people who kind of already know Photoshop at least a little bit, know how to use the program, and kind of want to see what the process is like in creating some of this stuff. So You're seeing actually here that I'm going through and rendering. I just use a standard brush, one of the standard brushes that comes with the software. I put the softness, the hardness, around halfway, probably about 40%, just so that it's not too hard of an edge, but not too soft. I don't want every surface to be baby soft. And I used those colors from what you were seeing on the overlaid layers. I used those as reference colors for creating the shadows, and I just went through and started rendering and blending and making sure that each of those shadows had different things about them. They weren't just directly just made as a one color fits all type of thing. Each part of the body, each thing needs to have a little bit different variation to kind of give it a little bit of liveliness. And you'll see I put a little bit of red kind of blush in there to help with making her flesh and skin feel like it's not a corpse. That's an important thing. So color and variation in skin is a really useful, a really important thing if you want to render the skin properly. At least I believe so. And you'll see here that I'm working more on the hands, trying to refine where everything is, and getting all the shading and coloring done right. And you'll see even here I zoom in a little bit more. I go in and make sure that the layer is separated from the other stuff properly. And for each layer, again, I said the leather has its own layer, the sash has its own layer, the lightning has its own layer. For each layer, I put a clipping mask on top of that layer, so I can render without altering the original parameters for where the color will be applied. So that is a extremely useful tip and tool that I use. I use it for pretty much every project. I do rendering on a separate layer outside of the original flat colors, so that I can just go in without any fear and just have at it and really just get into the zone. And one of the things that I find always important when working on figures is making sure that the face reads as doing what I want it to do. So in this one, I wanted her to look pretty intense, but I also wanted her to look very beautiful. And so it was really important for me to um, make the eyes really, really beautiful and make them stand out. Because that's pretty much the only part of her body that's blue, so I wanted to make sure that was looking as good as possible. And so again, I'm bringing this back onto full screen so that you can have a better idea as to what I'm doing here. And I'm going through with the lips, the lipstick, and this is a better thing to show you too, because you can see more in depth, what the colors look like and how they're blended, and the rendering that I use for all that. And I haven't even gotten to the hair yet. You're going to see me really going through this hair and making it look as good as I can. This is actually, at first I was a little apprehensive about it because I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, because I hadn't actually rendered hair like this. I hadn't started the process like this before. And so part of me was dreading that process, but the other part of me was kind of excited to see where it would lead me. So what you're seeing now is that I'm going through with a brush. Again, you can see that the hardness, I think the softness, yep, the hardness is pretty much halfway. The softness is going to vary depending on which layer I'm on, but I think for this one it was the softness was the hardness was pretty low. Sorry, I can't even speak. I'm sorry. And I'm going through altering the shape dynamics versus just non-shape dynamics, going through and applying very soft gradients throughout, just using the brush tool. Again, just using the default brush tool, nothing super fancy here. There's only one instance where I use a different brush, which was one of the natural brushes that you have with Photoshop. Other than that, these are all just standard brushes that you get with the software. You don't need to use anything particularly fancy or special in order to make your artwork look really great. So you can see already that just changing those very few things about the piece, the softness of the brush for the hair, all of that really makes such a huge difference, and it really helps the piece come together as a cohesive package as opposed to something that looks very disjointed. It was really important for me to explore my techniques for working with hair, and I think I'm going to moving forward. I'm going to render hair like this because it was really effective, and it was really fun actually. I really loved working on the hair this way. liberating not trying to go through individually with each strand of hair, because some oftentimes when you try to do it strand by strand, it does not look good. And when you're looking at a person, one of the things that I always try to keep in mind is that what you think of something as being will alter the way that you actually perceive that thing. So we know from experience that that hair is made of individual strands. Every bit of hair, every piece is a strand. But if you're looking at it as a whole, especially from a distance, you don't see each strand. You don't see it as each individual strand kind of being there. You see it as an entire essence, the entire thing. It's not just one little thing. So here I'm going through making sure that that energy that you see there. Again, I wish I could have recorded all that that process of making that energy, but you're seeing me really experiment with depicting that energy and kind of making it look really interesting without being too distracting. I think that's really important. But anyway, that was the quick overview slash tutorial of this piece, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching me put that together, and also enjoyed hearing me talk about it, talk about the process, and talk about some of the things that I've gone through for this. So if you guys like the video, definitely make sure to subscribe, because I will be also uploading a version of this time lapse as maybe a 3-minute thing, so that you can see just the beauty of it without my voice over it, and it'll be a lot quicker. So people who aren't looking for tutorials or tips and advice can just quickly jump in and say, oh hey, that looks pretty cool, or hey, I don't really like that way that looks. So again, thank you guys for tuning in and listening to me babble on about art. I love creating these types of images, and I hope you guys continue to stick around to see more stuff like this, more of the gaming stuff, more of the random comedy stuff. And yeah, thank you guys again. Subscribe to stay in tune with all the things going on the channel. And I love you all. Game on, and Jay Blaze out.